everybody? It is time for the Stokastic NFL Deeper Dive Thursday Night Football. And oh boy, do we have a good one on tap for you guys today. Two of the best teams in the National Football League, the Washington Commanders, the Chicago Bears. I'm excited for it. I know Neil is as well. As you guys come in, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Neil, I know it's nearly impossible to pick a winner of this game, but just gut feeling, tell me, which side are you leaning in this barn burner?
I'm going with the Bears here. I'm cheering for the Commanders, but I'm going to go with the Bears.
Here's what we're going to do. All right. I'm holding a bottle cap right here. Heads or tails, Neil?
Obviously heads. It's always heads.
All right. It appears the Bears are going to win according to my very scientific method that I just did by picking the winner of the game. So it's a close one.
Wait, was it heads or was it tails? You didn't even tell us.
I don't know. To be honest, it fell on the floor, and I guessed afterwards. That's because that's how random the game is. Even the coin flip, it ended up not really working out as intended. We're going with the Bears because the opposite side of what you had said there, and I want to add a little bit of drama to this.
No, that's the same side. I said I think it's.
Oh, did you say the Bears? Then I'm going with Commanders.
All right,
Commanders. The 1-point favorites. Total in this game is 38 points. People are going to be amped up to play the defenses in this game. We're sponsored by No House Advantage. We're going to be walking through this slate as a whole. But first of all, what are your just general thoughts on this game, being that it's such a low total and there's probably going to be people flocking to play the defenses? Is there anything specific that you are going to approach this game with differently than you do some other games?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously the defenses are in play. Both of these offenses are top 10 in the league in turnovers given up. I think they each have 8 turnovers given up, these teams, through 5 games. So they are a little bit turnover prone. So I get the defensive plays. I think one thing that I might consider doing is leave a little bit of extra salary on the table. Of course, this has not really worked out for me on these games where I think that you can leave a little bit of extra salary on the table. It's because, we've got I think there's a little bit more of a gray area between the top plays and the middle plays. Like there's more room, I think, for the mid-level plays to outscore the top-level plays, the low-level plays outscore the mid-level plays. I think there's room to leave some salary on the table here, just because it's not like a Chiefs game where that Travis Kelce's probably going to get his. That Patrick Mahomes is definitely going to get his, or Joe Mixon's probably going to get a lot. It's just going to be such a slugfest that some of these top plays might only have 7 fantasy points, and that leaves room for somebody low level to just sneak in a random touchdown and outscore them. So I think there's a little bit more room to leave salary on the table, but then of course it's going to be Curtis Samuel and Darnell Mooney scoring the touchdowns, and I'm going to be wrong again.
Yeah, and I mean, we also have some interesting running game things to talk about here in terms of just gut feeling for me, Neil. I think the defenses are very difficult to project for in this game. I think just taking statistics out of the equation, our simulations, our projections, I think people, just because of bias, number one, towards just dislike of these two teams, the narrative about Carson Wentz being hurt heading into the game, how bad these teams are, just everything involved, that in the Thursday Night Football games being so bad as of late. I wouldn't be surprised if the defenses are like 35% owned in this game. It's a real concern for me.
Yeah, this might be a game just to get contrarian, to not play the defenses, even though it's obviously a great spot for the defenses. But I share that concern with you, that I think that they could be a little bit steamed. That's not going to be my approach. I think I'm going to be playing the defenses probably in that 20%-ish range somewhere. But I think that it's a viable approach to just fade the defenses and hope that the game script is a little bit different than what people are assuming it's going to be.
Yeah, and the other thing too, and we're going to talk more about the defense in a little bit, just kind of talking about the game as a whole, but something else that I think could potentially happen. The Bears might run the ball a lot in this game, and it's kind of hard to score fantasy points as a defense if the other team is running. Less opportunities for turnovers. The sack opportunities aren't there. For reference, the over-under for pass completions for Justin Fields is 13.5. I think that's the lowest number I've ever seen for a quarterback for pass completion. So at the very least, it does indicate that the team's, at least on the Bear side, not expected to throw the ball a whole bunch. So my gut feeling is that the defense are going to end up being really popular. We'll see what that looks like later on, particularly after the show is over. We got ownership updates coming in live before lock and all that. So check out all of the content we have on the YouTube channel always, guys. But let's start digging into the game. And we are going to start on the Commander side. And first, we do have to start by talking a little bit about the narrative surrounding Carson Wentz, who, number one, hasn't played well as of late. But then point two, is apparently injured coming into the game. He's dealing with an arm injury. Is that something you're factoring in or considering at all when you're building your lineups?
Not a ton. So I'm getting a lot more Fields than Carson Wentz naturally, which is why I don't think it's a huge factor for me. Actually, my last run, now I'm looking at it. Oh, this must have been without a salary cap. But earlier when I was doing a run, I was getting like under 40% Carson Wentz anyway. It is a concern. You could consider if you wanted to, if you're a backup quarterback guy, this might be your week. Obviously, do not play Carson Wentz with Taylor Heineke, which is apparently a mistake I made at least once last year, playing both the starter and the backup quarterback. I don't think that that's a good approach. But I think that this might be, you could play a little bit of Taylor Heineke with the bum shoulder for Carson Wentz, but he's starting, so my assumption is he's probably going to finish the game. I might throw a few out there with Taylor Heineke, but it's not a huge priority for me.
Do you remember which game it was that you made the CSV error on that included the starting QB with his backup?
I believe it was week 1. I know that Kyle, oh man, I always forget names of Twitter people when they're not in front of me. Kyle Dvorak was doing some research.
I used to do this show with Kyle.
Yeah, so Kyle Dvorak was digging into that slate, and I was bragging about how I had a bunch of under 5 dupes on Twitter, and Kyle pointed out that I had some lineups that had both the starting quarterback with the backup quarterback. So maybe not the best approach.
Yeah, just because you have unique lineups doesn't always necessarily mean they're
No.
good. And that would be one of the categories where you'd say non-duped lineup, but probably not good if it has the QB
probably not the best lineup.
Backup QB. And yeah, not the best strategy. It was unique though, which
it was
at least that would be the worst if you have that and other people are also playing the same lineup.
Yeah. Similar to what we saw last week with the people leaving 18,000 salary on the table, and some of those lineups were still somehow duped. The double kicker, double defense lineups, like you're doing everything you can to be unique, and still they were somehow duped a little bit.
Which is also why I think that people are going to be more apt to play the defense. It's just becoming a thing where people are seeing some recent results of Thursday Night Football and just think, oh, games are played on Thursday, therefore they have to be low scoring. So, I mean, it's certainly possible because the total in this game is 38 points. It's either the lowest or close to the lowest total of the year. At the very least, it can't be far off. It's not like there's been games with 34, 35 point totals. So I really strongly feel that the ownership is hard to project for defenses because we don't typically see it get that high. I'm telling you, I would not be surprised if we're seeing defenses like 30+% owned on this slate. But the running game for the Commanders, we just talked a little bit about Carson Wentz here. When we're looking at the running backs, this is a tough situation to parse because there's still the situation where Antonio Gibson's in the mix, but now Brian Robinson's back, and he's a really crazy story. If you guys aren't aware, he got shot not all that long ago and missed the start of the season, was on the injured reserve, but now he's healthy, he's able to play, and I think he's going to be the lead back for Washington. Is that also your assumption?
They announced him as a starter. So yeah, I would assume that he is the lead back. It'll be interesting to see what kind of committee they use here, whether, maybe Antonio Gibson's not involved at all. That would be RIP to my best ball lineups. I'm really hoping that Antonio Gibson is not completely phased out, but it might happen here. They announced Brian Robinson the starter. Actually, I believe just hours before he was shot, they had announced him as the starter to begin the year. So he's just getting back into the role that he was going to have coming into the year. I would expect Brian Robinson to be the lead back here with JD McKissic mixed in, and who knows how much Antonio Gibson is going to be involved.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm feeling it is going to be as well. If we look at the usage for last week, Gibson was involved in passing down situations late in the game, was able to rack up PPR points. So he was targeted 4 times. He caught 3 of them. And how many yards did he have receiving? It was not very many. Let me pull up the box score for that game. So yeah, last game we saw Brian Robinson got 9 of the team's 17 carries. So more than 50% of the team's carries went to Robinson. Gibson had 3. And then the passing game, 3 catches, 33 yards on 4 targets for Gibson. JD McKissic, 5 catches for 37 yards on 7 targets. So what do you make of Gibson and McKissic as potential running back options as well? I think we're both in agreement that Robinson is likely to be the lead back for the team, but there is still some passing upside in McKissic and Gibson. How are you going to handle them in large field tournaments?
So I don't think this is necessarily the approach that I'm going to be taking, but I don't think it would be the wrong decision necessarily to full fade Antonio Gibson in 150 lineups, just because, okay, the price tag is high, 8,600. So this could be a pay up to be contrarian spot, right? If, we've got, everybody's assuming Brian Robinson's going to have this big role, people are going to fade Antonio Gibson. We have Antonio Gibson still projected for 15% ownership at 8,600 as a running back who might not be involved at all. So man, I don't think it would necessarily be the wrong take to full fade Antonio Gibson. As I said, I don't think that's what I'm going to do, but my guess is I'll be 10% or lower on Antonio Gibson, just because I do have that fear that he's just not going to be very involved at all. I mean, maybe he'll still get a handful of carries, but if he doesn't score a touchdown, I don't see any way he's paying off that 8,600 price tag. Now in this game, if you are going to be able to pay off that $8,600 price tag, maybe 8 fantasy points is enough. So maybe just 1 touchdown is plenty, but I think he's a pretty thin play this week with the running back committee and being 8,600.
Does it change for you at all on FanDuel where Gibson is 9,000? So the most likely scenario to me, Gibson is not all that involved in the offense, but at least on FanDuel, he's way cheaper relative to the salary cap structure where he's $9,000. So if you're looking at him on DK, the players you're comparing Gibson to who are the players priced around? So we've got Curtis Samuel, Terry McLaurin, Justin Fields, Darnell Mooney, like the best players in the game from a fantasy perspective. That's who Gibson is priced around over on DK. For FanDuel purposes at 9,000, then you're talking about him also compared to the kickers, Diami Brown, who is more of a dart throw play, somebody like Cole Kmet. So at least on FanDuel, where he's a lot cheaper, is that more of an option you might be willing to take a risk on with Gibson just because of the price you're paying less?
I do think both for that, and it's even lower owned on FanDuel. So he's cheaper and lower owned. So I think that he is more viable on FanDuel. I'll probably take more shots on FanDuel than DraftKings. We've got him in the captain spot 2.2% of the time. I might even try to play him in the captain a few spots and just hope that he can break off a touchdown. I don't think it's the worst idea. And then we've got him owned in the utility spot 11% of the time. So, not zero ownership. It's not like people are full fading him, but yeah, a little bit lower salary and a little bit less ownership. I do like him a little bit better on FanDuel, although I'm still probably going to be, certainly I don't think I'm going to be over the field.
And then as for JD McKissic, the other player to consider in this right now, like three running backfield, McKissic did get the majority of the passing game work compared to the other backs. We saw 0 targets go to Brian Gibson, then for 4 targets for Antonio Gibson had 4 targets. Brian Robinson had 0 targets, and then there was 7 targets going to JD McKissic. For DK purposes, does that make him appealing? FanDuel, we don't get the benefit of the full PPR, and that seems like that's where all of McKissic's work is going to come from. 7 targets. Do you think that's replicable? And is that kind of workload at least enticing for him from a DraftKings perspective?
I do think that it's replicable. I mean, yes, there is some concern that Antonio Gibson eats into JD McKissic's role rather than Brian Robinson's. We don't know for sure, but I think I'd be more inclined to take shots on JD McKissic than Antonio Gibson just because of the price tag is significantly cheaper. So he doesn't need to do as much to pay it off. And the ownership isn't high on McKissic either. We've got him owned in the captain spot 3% of the time, optimal 2% of the time. So some slight negative leverage, but then also in the utility spot, we have him at 19%, optimal 16% of the time. So slight negative leverage on JD McKissic, but I do think I'm more likely to go there because my guess would be that he's going to have at least the same, maybe even more of a role than Antonio Gibson at 2,200 less. And the ownership isn't significantly different. So I think that I'd be more inclined to take shots on JD McKissic.
All right. So let's talk about. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, so on FanDuel too, we've got JD McKissic at 7,500, which is he's just cheap on FanDuel. As you said, he's better in PPR. FanDuel is just half PPR, but he's still live to score a touchdown. We still have him optimal 14% of the time in the utility spot, and in the captain spot or the MVP spot, we have McKissic. Looks like these columns are a little bit different on FanDuel, so I'm having trouble finding him now. We've got him optimal 1.5% of the time. So I think he's more viable for me on FanDuel than DraftKings.
Yeah, I mean, if you just consider the price point and also the ownership, I think you make a case for that because at least relative to the salary structure, it looks like DraftKings priced these backs as if Gibson is going to be the lead guy and the other 2 guys, who knows what to make of them. FanDuel priced it as if Brian Robinson is going to be the starter. McKissic and Gibson as secondary and tertiary pieces, which I think FanDuel got the pricing right here, whereas DK is probably a week behind. So it's kind of interesting because it brings up these points where the pricing is wrong on DraftKings, but then for FanDuel purposes, because of the ownership and the pricing discount you're getting on some of these guys, you could kind of find reasons for upside. But just overall general picture play for the running backs, if you could only roster one in large field tournaments on DraftKings and FanDuel, and it doesn't have to be the same answer for both, you could do them individually, who would be the running back that you're prioritizing across DK and then across FanDuel?
Probably Brian Robinson. I mean, he's 200 more expensive than JD McKissic. My guess is that he's going to be pretty involved. They named him as the starter. He is getting more ownership, but he's only getting 6% more ownership than JD McKissic as a starting running back. So it's probably Brian Robinson for me, at least on DraftKings. On FanDuel, let me take a look. So we've got Brian Robinson at 1,100, McKissic at 7,500. It might actually be McKissic for me on FanDuel, more so than Brian Robinson.
Yeah, I could see that if we're considering price and ownership. It's funny because we were talking about the scoring before, and certainly the scoring is more favorable for McKissic over on DK, but some of the factors, including the lower pricing, the low ownership, you could certainly make a case for him as a cost-saving option for FanDuel purposes. We got a super chat from Eric Traub, and it's funny because he didn't leave the question. He just says, I believe you guys know the question. I do know it. Eric Traub, I believe you gentlemen know my question. Thank you for your time. So what Eric wants to know is who is, by the way, if he's asking me some totally random question that I've never heard from him before, then I'm going to be off the mark here. But if he's asking his normal question, he wants to know who our favorite play is for large field tournaments on DraftKings that's picking up less than 10% ownership. So, Eric, if that's not your question, then correct me, but I'm pretty sure that is what your question is going to be. So, Neil, let's figure it out. Who is our favorite play for less than 10% ownership on DK today? Let me sort by ownership. I want to cheat. There's somebody I like who's just above 10% ownership.
Do it, Greg. You should cheat.
So Diami Brown is projected for 11% ownership. It's not that far above the 10% mark, but I think given that I do expect the defenses to be more popular in the mid-range than what's currently really being able to be projected, I think that could reduce the ownership share for Brown a little bit. And he had a really big ceiling game the last time out. And I don't want to make it seem like I'm chasing points, but what I am chasing is him being more involved in the offense moving forward because he had a game where he showed big play upside, had over 100 receiving yards and a pair of touchdowns over the weekend. I don't think he replicates that, but I do think his performance was good enough to keep him more involved in the offense moving forward. So we've seen the upside in Diami Brown, and he's not projected to be all that popular. That's a contrarian play that I like getting to.
Okay, so we just got inactive, so this will play a role in my answer. Okay, we knew Jahan Dotson was going to be inactive, but I did just see, I think N'Keal Harry, it says, is inactive. So we cannot play N'Keal Harry tonight, if I read that correctly, which is a factor for me because we had kind of a messy situation. Yeah, N'Keal Harry inactive. Like to see that because that was a little bit hairy for me. The pun really was not intended there. But that does make it a little bit more interesting. So let me look. That maybe makes probably Smith Marset is a player who's going to interest me. We haven't projected for 3.4% projected ownership. I'm going to probably take some shots on Amir Smith Marset with N'Keal Harry out. Velus Jones is a rookie who is a speedster. They designed to play for him. His first touch, he played his first game of his NFL career last week. They designed to play for him at the goal line, and he scored a touchdown, which I love to see that. He only played 3 snaps, so it is a very real chance that Velus Jones puts up 0 fantasy points, but at 1.2% projected ownership, it might be Velus Jones too. It's probably between those guys for me, Velus Jones and Amir Smith Marset. He asked for just one. With just one, I'm going to go with Smith Marset.
Yeah, the answer is going to be Diami Brown for me. And then also to reiterate for the Commanders, a couple of guys that are out right now. Dotson, he is inactive tonight. Logan Thomas, also inactive. So there is additional targets and passing role to go around in that Commanders offense. I think Diami Brown, coming off the game they had on Sunday, he could draw 5-6 targets at low ownership. We know he has big play upside. So Diami Brown, that is going to be my answer. Now, Eric Traub, you better not post that you have a totally different question. Like he's going to ask us like who our least favorite captain play is or something like that. But I'm pretty sure that we answered Eric's question correctly. Let's talk about the wide receiving options for the Commanders now. So I just mentioned that I like Diami Brown as a lower owned option for today. And we just got news officially. Dotson is out. Logan Thomas is out. So with all that being considered, Neil, starting with DraftKings, who are the pass catchers for the Commanders that you're going to be eyeing with them being a little bit shorthanded at the position?
So The obvious answer is going to be Curtis Samuel, who has just been a beast so far this year. Um, and he looks good in the tools. We have him projected for 9% captain ownership, optimal 10% of the time. In the utility, we have him owned 39% of the time, optimal 45% of the time. So Curtis Samuel at 8,200, he has been the lead receiver for the Commanders so far this year. He is the obvious one. I think I might try to get to more Terry McLaurin than Curtis Samuel, just because I have some worry at least, and maybe I'm misunderstanding what the field is likely to do psychologically, because the field might still see Terry McLaurin as the wide receiver one, and our ownership projections don't reflect that, though. Our ownership projections suggest the field is going to assume Curtis Samuel is the wide receiver one, and I get it. He's a great play. I think that I'm going to take some shots on Terry McLaurin kind of taking over a little bit more. He's run more routes than Curtis Samuel this year. I think he's got that big game coming. So I think I'm probably going to play more Terry McLaurin than Curtis Samuel. But they both look phenomenal. They are the top two wide receivers for the Commanders today by a long shot. After those two, let me pull up my look at the projections a little bit. Yeah.
By the way, while you're all pulling that up, I'll just read off some information here. Curtis Samuel, $8,200 on DraftKings. We currently have him projected to be owned nearly 10% in the captain spot, and then 38% in the utility spot. So close to 50% ownership going to Curtis Samuel right now. Whereas Terry McLaurin, 7% in the captain spot, 31% in utility. So if you're somebody who thinks, well, Terry McLaurin still has a lot of talent and could be the wide receiver one for Washington moving forward, well, you're getting a pretty big ownership discount on him compared to Curtis Samuel, if you think that is going to be the case. So we right now do have McLaurin projected for less ownership, but also we do have a slightly higher overall projection going to Curtis Samuel. But what other notes do you have on the wide receivers here, Neil?
Yeah, so I actually just pulled up my article to refresh something. So Cam Sims played 59% of snaps for the Commanders in week 5, which was his season high by a wide margin. And that's because Jahan Dotson was sidelined. Jahan Dotson is still sidelined. So Cam Sims likely to play a significant role for the Commanders. He's only 1,400. He also could have been in the mix for my favorite plays under 10% owned. We have him projected for just 8% ownership at 1,400. Very involved last week. So Cam Sims is somebody who is going to interest me. After Cam Sims, are we just talking wide receivers right now, or are we talking about all?
Yeah, we'll do wide receivers now, and then
Okay.
we'll do tight ends differently since Logan Thomas is out. So we'll talk the DK wide receivers, and then we'll move over to FanDuel for the wideouts, and then we'll go to the tight ends.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah, so those are the three that I'm most interested in for the Commanders. Let me see if there's anybody else that I wanted to mention. Dyami Brown, you brought up as an interesting play. Dyami Brown is certainly in play tonight as well. I haven't really taken a strong stance on Dyami Brown. Let me take a look at the boom bust tool. So we've got him projected. Okay, so just 8% ownership on Dyami Brown. That's kind of interesting. Maybe I'll take 10% ownership on Dyami Brown, 6% optimal. I'll probably take some shots on Dyami Brown too.
Yeah, so I mean, for me, that's the low owned guy that kind of stands out. And then as far as FanDuel goes, I actually don't think the wide receivers look all that much different on FanDuel compared to DK. The pricing is similar. The ownership is similar. We still got McLaurin as being the most expensive wide receiver on Washington, even if Curtis Samuel's played a bigger role. But Curtis Samuel, just like over on DK, he's $1,000 cheaper on FanDuel. He's also more popular. So it does look like right now we've got Curtis Samuel is just going to be the more rostered player compared to Terry McLaurin. I like McLaurin as a pivot play, really on both sides. I think there's leverage playing McLaurin as opposed to Samuel on both FanDuel and DK. McLaurin over on FanDuel, only projected for 2.5% captain ownership or MVP ownership compared to Samuel, right at 6%. And then the utility spot also, we're looking at a lot more ownership not a lot more, but also a little bit more ownership going to Curtis Samuel. So if McLaurin's able to recapture that wide receiver one role, you're getting leverage off the field. I get that he's a little more expensive, but it is somebody who I like playing in large field tournaments.
Yeah, and I mean, we're saying recapture, but he has run the most routes on the team. He has been targeted 31 times. I guess Curtis Samuel has been targeted 43 times. So it's fair to say Curtis Samuel has been the wide receiver one so far this year, but Terry McLaurin is an extremely talented wide receiver. I think that he's going to have his week. So I think that is, a stance that I'm taking is a little bit overweight to McLaurin.
All right, we've got a super chat here from RaceFan22, and then we'll talk about the rest of the wideouts over on FanDuel. But RaceFan22, he wants to know what we think about Darnell Mooney at captain. Also wants to know Mooney's projected ownership. So right now, Mooney is projected for right around 7% captain ownership over on DK, which Seems about fair to me. Right now, we have him projected also for 7% optimal captain odds. Overall, I think Mooney looks pretty fairly owned. If anything, maybe a little bit light in the utility spot. But Mooney, I think, is definitely somebody who's worth getting to. But I don't have any really strong takes as him being good or bad. At least per our projections, he's about neutrally owned as a captain.
Yeah, he's an interesting play. So Darnell Mooney leads the Bears in routes run with 122 and in targets with 20. That is way behind. Terry McLaurin leads the Commanders in routes runs with 222. So 100 more routes run than Darnell Mooney. The Bears the offense doesn't run as many plays. They don't pass it as much. So, he looks fine. He actually looks good in the boom bust tool. He looks a little bit under owned at captain. As Greg said, 7% projected ownership in the captain spot, 9% optimal. 30%, 31% ownership in the utility spot, 33% optimal. So a little bit of positive leverage on Darnell Mooney. He also is only 7,600 in the flex spot. So you save a little bit of money by playing him either in the flex spot or in the captain spot relative to some of the other studs. So I do like Darnell Mooney. I think that he's the pretty clear wide receiver one for the Bears. And they might be able to pass on this Commanders defense. So this might be a breakout spot for Mooney.
Yeah, and by the way, if you guys want access to all of these tools and you haven't signed up for a Stokastic package yet, you get access to it for free for 3 days. Get stuff like the Boom Bust tool for NFL, both for main slates and for some of the single game showdown slates. Got it projections, ownership projections. So if you've been unsure about whether to try it out or not, good news. It's free for 3 days, and just about everybody could afford free. Maybe not Jordan. I know he's fallen on some tough times recently. He can't afford free. He's got negative $6 in his bank account. If somebody wants to loan Jordan $6, he could afford $0. But for everybody else, check it out risk free for 3 days and see what we have behind the paywall over at Stokastic. But let's get back to talking about these other pass catchers for the Commanders. And we talked about Curtis Samuel over on FanDuel. We talked about Terry McLaurin. Are there any cheap pass catching options that you think make sense for FanDuel purposes?
Or FanDuel wide receivers?
Yeah, from the Commanders.
Okay, let me see. I mean, I think the same guys are probably still going to be in play. Diami Brown, 8,000. As you talked about, he's certainly in play. Let's see, just pass catchers. Cam Sims, I'm going to like at 3% projected ownership. Sign me up for some Cam Sims as the number 3 receiver for the Commanders. Sad thing here is I have to, for this game, I don't have to do this for most games. Some of these guys, I'm like, wait, is he on the Commanders or the Bears? Some of these guys are throwing me off.
It's bad. It's not great.
It doesn't happen to me for most games. Okay. Yeah. So Cam Sims, somebody I do have interest in. Dante Pettis is the one. Is he on the he is on the Bears. Who was the other? Probably not playing a ton of Dax Milne tonight. So yeah, it's gonna be Cam Sims for me, a little bit of Diami Brown. I think that you liked him better than I did. He's your favorite cheap guy. I think I'd rather go to Cam Sims. I have a little bit more interest there.
All right, so let's get back talking about the tight ends now because we would try to separate them. And usually I just kind of group all the pass catchers together when we're breaking down these games. But since Logan Thomas is out for Washington, I do think it introduces a little bit of a different element. We could talk more specifically about the tight ends a little bit different from the wide receivers. Who do you think on Washington stands to gain the most without Logan Thomas? I could tell you in some of the builds that I did, I was actually getting overweight to the field on John Bates, and I think he looks like a pretty good value option.
I like both of these tight ends who are viable for the Commanders. John Bates, yeah, he played 59% of snaps for the Commanders last week with Logan Thomas out. He was actually in a lot of my DFS lineups, not because of any kind of stance that I took. He just projected well enough that he made it into a fair number of my lineups. As I said, played 59% of snaps last week with Logan Thomas out. Could see a similar kind of workload. He's also been targeted 9 times in the past 2 weeks, so that looks pretty good. The targets are picking up for John Bates. He's certainly interesting. And then Cole Turner is only 200, made his NFL debut for the Commanders in week 5, and he was targeted twice on 21 routes run in his NFL debut. I think that he is also in play. We have him projected for just over 3 fantasy points at 300. So kind of a dart throw, but 21 routes run in his first game. Maybe he picks up a little bit more here. Could cut into John Bates a little bit. I think both of them are in play.
Yeah, and then over for FanDuel, it's not really any different for me. It's Bates, $5,500. I actually think if you're going to go super cheap on FanDuel and play anybody below 6,000, Bates is the best play by a mile for me over on FanDuel. They're the guys who have really any kind of semblance of a projection for that cheap over on FanDuel. We've got Dante Pettis, we've got John Bates, we've got Cam Sims. Of those guys, Bates is by far the highest odds of being optimal. So I don't think we need to go too much cheaper than John Bates. And I do think the tight ends look a little bit different for FanDuel from Washington, just from a standpoint of I think that we could kind of just go to Bates because the 5,500 salary is compared to going to 5,000 and trying to dig for a different tight end. I like getting to Bates over on FanDuel as well. Is it Bates for you on FanDuel also at the 5,500 salary?
Yeah, I'm definitely going to be above the field on Bates. I think that is almost a sure thing at pretty low ownership. One thing that I love about FanDuel is the ownership really condenses a little bit on certain players. And so you can really find you can find players at really low ownership. So I love Bates there, but I also really like Cam Sims at 5,500 coming in at 3% projected ownership. I'll be taking some shots on Cam Sims. Smith Marset, we have it under 1% owned. And as I said, I think and Velas Jones, a lot of these guys who I think are viable and they could score a touchdown. It wouldn't be the most shocking thing in the world. They'll have opportunities. And I think in this game, one touchdown is probably enough to make these guys optimal. So honestly, I'm going to be probably above the field on a lot of these lower owned guys on FanDuel, just because people really go away from the guys who don't project that well relative to their salary. But ultimately, if they score a touchdown, it's pretty easy to become optimal in a game like this if it goes the way we expect it to on FanDuel. So I kind of like a lot of these low owned guys, the Equinemius St. Brown, Diami Brown, Cam Sims, Dante Pettis, Cole Turner. I think all of these guys are in play, but John Bates, certainly he is probably leads the pack there in terms of likelihood of being optimal.
Super chat from Melissa Harvey. Hello, gentlemen. Who do you like for DK Cash from this incredible matchup? So, it's funny because there's almost nobody in this game that I would normally consider a cash option in any format, but it's kind of hard because you have to fill out the lineup with somebody in a cash game. So for me, the ones that I feel the best about, the players we just know are going to be on the field at the very least. And I know they're expensive, but Justin Fields, David Montgomery, Carson Wentz. I know that they're expensive. They're the three most expensive players by far on DK. I think all of them should be in cash lineups, though. And then I would go cheap elsewhere to kind of fill out the lineup, like John Bates. I think that he makes a lot of sense for cash games, but just because there's so much uncertainty with some of the other expensive or more expensive type players, I really do think, especially also because they're going to be popular, Fields, Montgomery, Wentz, I think they should all be in cash lineups. And then my favorite salary saving play is going to be John Bates for cash games. Neil, I know that you yourself, more of a tournament player, you've got your millionaire maker win, which you don't win in cash games typically, unless, that'll be a crazy high dollar cash game. But any other takes you have for cash games, any players you see as having really high floors?
So I agree with you. Fields and Montgomery are like sure things. Slight concern about Carson Wentz. I'm probably with you. He's probably making it into my lineup. But if you can't fit him, I wouldn't really mind going down to like Brian Robinson, some of these guys who are kind of mid and like Darnell Mooney, just because they're cheaper. You could go down to those guys, but you're probably right. I think it's probably the right approach to play Carson Wentz as well. So those three expensive guys, and then maybe kickers, defense probably are the safer options among the cheaper players here. Are guys that I would people not people, positions I would consider, I guess, for cash. You think Brian Robinson's in play at 6,600? I don't know. It's maybe because of the committee, it's a little bit thin for cash.
Yeah, for cash, I prefer to stay away from committees. Like you and I both agree that we think Brian Robinson is most likely to be the RB1. But if Gibson gets more touches, then could we say we would be stunned? Or if it's just Gibson, Robinson, McKissick all get touches and make it so that none of them have much of a floor or a ceiling, wouldn't surprise me. So it's a situation for cash games I would tend to avoid.
Yeah, no, I think I'm with you.
All right. Let's talk about defense and kickers in general, because I just want to say my stance for defenses on this slate, and I think you're going to feel a little bit differently than me, Neil. I'm taking the defenses out of my player pool. It could certainly be something that destroys me, but my gut feeling here, and it's one of these things that's really hard to project for. I brought it up at the top of the show. I think that the defenses are going to be massively popular in this game today. Just all the narrative about how bad these teams are, how bad some of the Thursday night football games have been. I think the field is going to play these defenses in a massive way. I think they're going to end up being north of 30% owned. With that in mind, I am going to be avoiding the defenses, and I just wanted to group them together for that reason, because that's just my stance on them in a blanket way for this game. But how do you feel about the defenses?
So I don't think that that's necessarily a wrong take, because I do share your concern that maybe they get more ownership than we are projecting the for. We're projecting the Commanders for 25% ownership in the flex spot, the Bears for 24. So pretty high ownership on these defenses, and they could get steamed up even more, which it would not surprise me at all. I think in 150 lineups, I would be more hesitant to full fade them, just because, they are playing against offenses that give the ball away. Not necessarily Justin Fields. I think Justin Fields has 2 interceptions on the year, and then the Bears have 6 fumbles lost. And on the other hand, I think that Carson Wentz has 6 interceptions on the year. I might have those numbers off a little. Maybe it's 4-4 for the Bears. I'm not sure exactly, but both these teams do turn the ball over a little bit. They're not great offenses, so I get why people want to go to the defenses. It's probably not a full fade for me, but I do think I'm likely to be under the field on defenses, just because I agree with you. They're probably going to get steamed.
Yeah, that's what I feel about it. Now, if it ends up the ownership comes out and the defense are like 15% owned, then I'll be like, well, I've made a massive error. But I just really don't think that's where it's going to be based on some of the narratives and the discourse that I have seen online. Today's show is sponsored by No House Advantage. If you guys haven't signed up at No House Advantage yet, you should be taking advantage for a couple of reasons. Number one, there's constant overlay on No House Advantage, which is always a plus EV thing you should be getting in on. And then also, if you sign up for the first time by clicking on the link below, they're going to match your deposit up to $50. So a little bit of free money when you get in the door at No House Advantage. And you're getting some overlay there, which is always going to be a good situation to take advantage of. And over on Stokastic.com, we have lineups pre-built for No House Advantage. You could just upload and play right over on NHA. It's prop-based contest, but still, everything about it is simple, and there's clear EV there, considering the deposit bonus and then also how much overlay they've had this year. Now, let's talk about the Bears side of the game. And starting with Justin Fields, and I think we could talk about him being the same on FanDuel and DraftKings, because at least it is for me. I think he's the highest upside player and even the highest floor on the slate. As bad as he's played this year, well, a lot of the players haven't been really good this year. That's one point. But then also, he brings a rushing upside that should give him at least some fantasy points of a floor to work off of. So Justin Fields, 10,000 over on DK. Over on FanDuel, he's priced at 16,000. He's my favorite overall player on the slate to pay up for. Is it the same for you?
Yeah, so we have him projected for 18% ownership in the captain spot on DraftKings, and optimal 22% of the time. So even at 18% ownership, we have him under owned in the captain spot. I'm going to have a ton of Justin Fields. I was running some crunches earlier, and I'm getting him in like 90+% of my lineups overall. I'll probably cut it back from there. I don't think I want him in 90+% of my lineups, but I think Justin Fields, he's the highest projected play on the slate. I will say that doesn't mean as much on this slate as it does on some slates. He's still projected for under 17 fantasy points. We have slates where we have guys projected for like 27 fantasy points. So, the range of projections is not quite as wide at the top here as it sometimes can be. But I do think that Justin Fields, as you said, I agree with you. He has the highest floor. He has the highest ceiling. He does it on the ground. He throws the ball. There's just a lot of ways for Justin Fields to score fantasy points. So, yeah, I think he is the best play on the slate from just a vacuum likelihood of putting up a big fantasy score play. The ownership is pretty high, 53% projected ownership in the flex spot, 19% in the captain spot. So the ownership is there, but it's warranted. I think that, as you said, yeah, highest floor, highest ceiling. A lot to like about Justin Fields. I was kind of surprised looking through his game log to find he only has one game in his career where he's rushed for over 100 rushing yards, which that's a huge thing, especially on DraftKings where you get the bonus at 100 rushing yards. You're kind of looking for that kind of rushing upside, but he clearly has that in his range of outcomes. He regularly rushes for like 50, so I think he has that spike week potential rushing and then obviously throwing the ball as well. So I'm with you on Fields.
Yeah, and then as for David Montgomery, before when I was talking about cash game players, I think David Montgomery has one of the higher floors of anybody that we could look at from a cash game purpose. But then even for tournaments, like there's a lot of cheap guys that you and I both mentioned we like getting to. John Bates at tight end, some cheaper wide receivers. I like Diami Brown. You had mentioned Sims is another cheap wideout to get to. I actually find this to be a game where I don't have that much issue creating salary space to get up to some of the high end guys. So Fields, Montgomery, these are two of my more rostered players, both FanDuel and DraftKings. I think they make sense. Montgomery looks a little bit overowned on FanDuel, a little bit underowned on DK, but either way, I think he's a player that warrants being in a lot of lineups. Do you have any alternative take when it comes to Montgomery?
No, I don't. Montgomery he has the volume. He's going to continue getting the volume. He's the third highest projected player on the slate. Montgomery and Carson Wentz, from just a projection standpoint, are basically interchangeable, except for that David Montgomery doesn't rely on anybody for his fantasy scoring. So there's a lot to like about David Montgomery on both sides. He'll be a big part of my lineups. The biggest thing, and as you say, you can play a lot of high salary guys and fit them all into your lineup with some of these cheaper guys. I am going to be leaving some salary on the table, so maybe I'm not going to be able to get to all of Fields, Wentz, and Montgomery in every lineup, but it's certainly plausible on a slate like this where we do have a number of decent cheaper options.
Yeah, and then as for the secondary running backs that we have for the Bears, we've seen a big game from Khalil Herbert this year that came what was that, 2 or 3 weeks ago when David Montgomery was chalk and got hurt. Here's the issue with that game. Because that game happened, Herbert is still priced fairly expensively. He's 10-5 over on FanDuel. On DK, he's priced up to 6,200. And he's picking up some ownership on both sites. Considering his price and that people are getting to him, it's hard for me to consider Khalil Herbert. At the very least, I think he's somebody who warrants being underweight to in large field tournaments. What stands out to you about Khalil Herbert, if anything? And are there any other Bears running backs that you like in this game?
Yeah, I think my guess is I'm going to be close to the field. I was just seeing Stephen Lee was just pointing out that I had Fields' ownership wrong, and then I just refreshed, and now it's showing 0%. So things are changing quickly in the boom bust tool.
So by the way, when it shows 0%, it's just it's an update is going on at the moment. So okay. it means that there'll be a new ownership showing in like 2 or 3 minutes.
Okay, so I was a little bit off. I think that I had both his optimal and his ownership a little bit over projected. Stephen Leibowitz is right, but he does still have positive leverage in the captain spot. So Fields is still my favorite captain. And then as far as Khalil Herbert, I don't think I have a particularly strong take on Khalil Herbert. What do we have his salary? We have him at 6,200. It's just he's so close to both JD McKissic and Brian Robinson in terms of salary. He is lower owned at only 12% ownership. I'll probably get to a little bit under the field on Khalil Herbert. I don't see myself getting to a ton, even as the passing game running back, the receiving back. He hasn't been as involved as these Washington backs have been in the passing game. So probably I'll be underweight to Khalil Herbert and overweight to McKissic and Robinson, potentially, or closer to the field on McKissic and Robinson.
Yeah, totally makes sense to me. For me, I like getting to Montgomery a bunch on DK. FanDuel, definitely somebody to be in one of my more exposed players, though maybe a little bit underweight relative to where the field's at. Khalil Herbert, for me, 13% projected ownership over on FanDuel. Over on DK, FanDuel then looking at around 7% ownership, just numbers that I didn't get to when I was running crunches before. Now, let's talk about the pass catchers for the Bears, because this is where things get tricky, because Justin Fields, we mentioned we like him relative to this game, but a lot of it has to do with his rushing upside. I mentioned it at the top of the show. His passing completions prop for today is 13.5. That is a crazy low number. If he hits the under on that, it would mean that there's not a lot of upside to any of these Bears wide receivers. So what are you going to do with the pass catching options for Chicago? We'll group the wide receivers and the tight ends here together, starting with DK. Who is the one that stands out the most to you?
I mean, it's Darnell Mooney. I think he is the top option for the Bears. None of them look great relative to the Commanders. 122 routes run, as I said, for Darnell Mooney leads the team. 20 targets leads the team. Those aren't great numbers for a lead receiver, but I would expect if they are able to, do a little bit more damage through the air, maybe have a little bit more success against the Commanders. Maybe Darnell Mooney. I would expect Darnell Mooney to be the guy who is most likely to benefit there. So I like Darnell Mooney. We talked about him earlier. He has some positive leverage in both the captain spot and the utility spot. He is probably my number one play among all the pass catchers for the Bears. Cole Kmet, kind of interesting. He's run 109 routes on the year, second of all Bears receivers. He's only been targeted 12 times, which is actually behind Equanimeous St. Brown. He is third on the Bears in targets at 12. These numbers are all so little and so close that I don't read a whole lot into the order here in terms of targeting. But I think Cole Kmet, he's a talented tight end. We had big expectations for him coming into the year. So he might be a guy who gets a little bit more involved if they're able to move the ball through the air a little bit. Equanimeous St. Brown, actually 104 routes run, 13 targets. he could also, if the Bears are able to move the ball through the air, he could be a guy who gets a little bit more involved. So they're probably my top three options there are those three. Everybody else, there's nobody else outside of David Montgomery who has double-digit targets on the year. So these are just not guys who are, man, Khalil Herbert, 5 targets on the entire year. Thinking of him as the pass catching back for the Bears, has 5 targets on the entire year. That is not all that promising for Khalil Herbert.
How many does Montgomery have?
10.
10. Yeah. Look at it from that. And also, how many of those Herbert targets came in the game that Montgomery got hurt? Right. So he might not even be the pass catching back. He might be the back who plays in the games that Montgomery's chalk and gets hurt games.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so I not a lot to love there. I talked about earlier how much I like Emir Smith-Marset at just 3.4% projected ownership. He's 600. And Velus Jones, the rookie who, had just 3 snaps last week, so not a lot to get excited about there. But, they might be trying to switch things up offensively. They haven't had a ton of success overall this year. So I do have some interest in both of these guys. Smith-Marset played a season high 38 snaps for the Bears in week 5. And he's only $600. So it would take one splash play to pay off his salary. And then Velus Jones, as I said, 2,600. He's expensive relative for a guy who has 3 career snaps. He's 2,600, pretty expensive, but he's going to get 0 ownership. And as I said, he had a design play for him at the goal line last year. So some interest in Velus Jones as well at no ownership.
And then does anything change as far as FanDuel goes? Because to me, we talked about the pass catching options on the Commanders compared to DraftKings and FanDuel. I kind of feel the same for the Bears in terms of there's nothing that looks all that different for me, DraftKings compared to FanDuel. The guys like Mooney, I think, is the priority wideout for the Bears over on FanDuel. If I'm going to get a little bit cheaper, the guy who's the priority for me with the Bears is going to be Cole Kmet. Is there anything to you that looks different from a FanDuel purpose compared to DK for the Bears pass catchers?
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned it earlier that just some of these guys are getting virtually no ownership. So if they do score a touchdown, you can really benefit from a Velus Jones at under 1% ownership. If they do design a play for him, he just has that one touch for a touchdown again. That's going to be enough, most likely, to pay off his $6,500 price tag. So some interest in Velus Jones. Equanimous St. Brown up to 7.2% projected. Sorry, that is the 2 to 5%. Where do we have the ownership here? Captain. Flex ownership. Here we go. Okay. We have
for which player do you want to know? I have it in front of me.
So we got Velus Jones at 0.2%. We have Equanimous St. Brown at 9.8% projected ownership. So that has come up a little bit, not quite as enticing. But as far as Bears pass catchers, we have Cole Turner's he's on the Commanders. Smith-Marset at 1.8% projected ownership. That's going to interest me at 5,000. And then Velus Jones at 0.2%. These are just guys getting no ownership who, in a game that's going to be low scoring, they could score a touchdown. So I'll probably be above the field on both. I will be above the field on both of them.
Yeah, totally makes sense to me. And then as far as the kickers go in this game, we just got like 90 seconds left here before we turn it over to the live before lock duo. So if you guys haven't done it yet, do us a favor, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. And as per usual, check out all the content that we have on the channel. Only a few days away from the start of the NBA season, coming up on Tuesday. Kickers in this game, either of them that you're going to be prioritizing in tournaments?
Yeah, Greg. So I'm in a fantasy football league with a guy who's sort of a friend of a friend, kind of a friend of mine. But I don't know him all that well. He probably doesn't even know that I do fantasy football content for a living. And he said that he's figured out Thursday night specifically, Thursday night showdown. You just got to play kickers, and that's how you win Thursday night football showdown. So I guess if you want to follow his instruction, just play these kickers. But no, honestly, I don't have a strong preference here. I think both kickers are in play. The kickers, almost always kickers make for pretty good point per dollar plays, especially in a game where, we're not going to probably see a ton of touchdowns scored. It could end up being a 12-9 slugfest kind of thing. So these kickers are certainly in play. We've got them both for under 20% ownership. My guess is I will be right around the field on both these guys. I don't have a strong take. Do you have a strong preference between these two?
Just because of the weather, I'm going to prefer to not get to the kickers in this game. And I'm going to hope there's actually touchdown scored on a Thursday night football game for once. Like, that's what I'm playing for. I don't really like the kickers all that much. Don't really like the defenses. I usually play a lot of kickers in Showdown, but it's hard to project for some of the windy conditions. It looks like that's going to be in play today. So I'm going to try to be a little bit underweight to the kickers. And by the way, also something that doesn't usually happen for us, we have Joey Sly being slightly over-owned over on DK, and then Cairo Santos about appropriately on. Typically on these showdown slates, we have kickers as like the top value plays. It's very rare that's not the case. So I'm going to take my chances going low on kickers, not going to play the defenses. And I hope that this is not a game that plays out like every other game this year.
Yeah, I think that is a fine approach. I'm not taking a strong stance on the kickers, I guess, is what it comes down to for me. But if I were to take a stance, I think I might be with you.
All right, one super chat left to get to from Eric Traub, and that will wrap up the show. We've had a good one here. We've talked about football. Chad has talked about my hair. It's been a lot of good ongoings here. Eric Traub, is the Wentz injury news making his ownership lower? And are you willing to take the chance and go above the field on him? In my current build, I am overweight to the field on Carson Wentz. Is it a concern? Yes, but all of the players in this game are largely terrible. I'm concerned about the talent of all of them. Carson Wentz is a quarterback, and generally those do score well in the showdown contest, and at least in our simulations. He is going under owned on both FanDuel and DraftKings. So I like getting to Carson Wentz. I'm going to be overweight to the field. Neil, do you believe you're going to be over or underweight to Carson Wentz in large field tournaments?
If I had to guess, because I am leaving salary on the table, I think I'm going to end up underweight to the field on Carson Wentz and overweight to the field on Justin Fields. Justin Fields projects better, and he's cheaper than Carson Wentz, and I don't have the concerns about his shoulder. So my guess is I'll end up underweight to the field on Carson Wentz, but not by too much. And we haven't projected for nearly 50% ownership on DraftKings in the utility spot. So it doesn't, at least according to our ownership projections, we're not expecting him to be under-owned due to the shoulder injury. He maybe more of the field will react to it. Maybe he'll come in underweight to what we expect, but we currently are projecting him for a pretty healthy ownership.
All right, that does it for Neil and I today, guys. Thank you very much for watching. If you haven't done it yet, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and stick around because Live Before Lock is coming on for the next hour to take you up to lock.
What's up? This is Andy Francis. I'm here to give you my picks for the No House Advantage versus the House contest, where you're going to net up to 20 times your money if you can nail 5 player props. If you haven't heard of No House Advantage, it's a fresh new fantasy platform. It combines fantasy and player props in an easy-to-use platform that allows you to win stacks of cash. They have a versus the House option, which we're doing today, and then yesterday we submitted our picks for the Pick'em tournament. So what it does, it shows you player props for players on these games of the NFL. And let's say tonight, David Montgomery, rushing, over, under. You choose which one you think it is. And for this versus the House contest, if you get 5 of those right, you get 20 times your cash. That's what I'm going to try to be doing tonight in this absolutely miserable Washington Commanders Chicago Bears game. The quarterbacks look, I don't know. Something is fishy about these quarterbacks. This can be an absolutely disgusting game. It's an extremely low over-under. And I just recently read that out of the last 8 over-unders, which have been set this low on prime time, 7 have gone under. So I don't know if I have faith in these quarterbacks throwing the ball as much. So I'm going to look at the skill position players. I'm going to start with both running backs. First, on Chicago, I'm looking at David Montgomery. I'm going to take the under on his. He just came back from an injury, did play well in his first game back, but you got to think coming back from an injury, it's a short week, so maybe they're going to divvy up the carries a little bit more, and even adding on to that, the Washington run defense has actually been decent. I believe it's top half of the league, but it was top third in the league. Then they faced Derrick Henry, and there really is no stopping him. So, when you combine those two factors, potentially limited Montgomery along with Washington's decent run D, I feel comfortable taking the under on David Montgomery. Then on the other side, Brian Robinson, great story, but we don't know his workload. They have 3 running backs there. We don't know how they're going to divvy up the carries just yet. So he might even have a good yards per carry, but not actually get the attempts to hit the number. So give me the under on Brian Robinson. Then looking at the wide receivers on these teams. It's always going to be scary if you're taking the over on one of Justin Fields' receivers, but I'm going to do it because I like what we're seeing lately from Darnell Mooney. He topped this current total that they have it at the last 2 weeks, and he's had at least 5 targets in the last 3 games. You like to see that. You'd like to think that if he gets at least 5 targets tonight, he's going to be able to hit the over on that reception yardage. So I'm going to take the over on Darnell Mooney, and then on the other side of the
Oh my God. What is going on, everybody? Welcome to the NFL Live Before Lock show for Thursday Night Football, presented by No House Advantage. I'm Eric Lindquist. We're going to talk ourselves through this glorious, amazing, fantastic, splendid, nifty little football game we have before us. Washington Commanders, Chicago Bears. The guys did a great job on the show before us. Something they didn't do a great job at, though, hitting that like button. Get that thumbs up. We're at, 200? At the end of last show, we got Matt Savoca to sing, and it was, oh my God, oh so glorious. You want to talk about being thirsty? I am thirsty for some Matt Savoca in my life. He's at Draftaholic on the old Twitter.com. Go check him out there. Go check him out doing all the things on the Fantasy Football channel, on this channel, everywhere you can see Matt Savoca, and that makes me happy. How you doing, my dude?
This is the greatest football game ever played that is about to happen. This is the greatest football we are ever getting. Washington at Chicago, 38-point total, 14-mile-per-hour winds, two quarterbacks who are either injured or incompetent. This is going to be great. I don't know. I don't know what to do. We're all degenerates. I'm so happy to be here. I'm so happy you're here in chat. Let's break this down, man. Let's drink our way through it. You said talk our way through it. We need to talk our way down from this game. Stop. What are we doing?
I poured myself an afternoon coffee because I just can't even deal with today. I'm doing NHL prop cards. I'm doing NBA preseason DFS. I have NHL lineups. I have, we had meetings. We had so many things going on, but I am looking forward to this NFL Thursday night game. You should be looking forward to it over at No House Advantage as well. We'll talk about them a little bit later, but go sign up. Use promo code Stokastic. Get yourself up to a $50 first match deposit bonus as we get started. But anything you want to really bring up with inactives? I saw N'Keal Harry's out, and I had to remember which team he played for because that's kind of where I'm at in my life. What do you think about the inactives? What do you think about this game before we dig in?
I couldn't believe that I cared about N'Keal Harry being inactive because it meant that I needed to change my lineups, but so it goes with this kind of slate. Logan Thomas being out. Logan Thomas being out does affect things. I do think you see a significant snap share from John Bates. I realize they have Turner on the team. He does have a projection somewhere around 3 points. We don't really know what his target share is going to be. I think John Bates is a player that I'm going to be very interested in. It's simply because we just don't have a lot of interesting options outside those top two. And I guess De'Ami Brown too, because he caught two passes. They just happened to go for very big yards last week.
Well, he's going to be like a deep threat. Like that's kind of what we're looking at for his profile, right? Like De'Ami Brown, Cam Sims is terrible. So PFF has him on the outside. And I started laughing this morning because I'm like, what are we doing right now where PFF doesn't even care? And they don't even put out the guy who played significantly more snaps and was significantly more involved last week. I will say, you know what's disgusting? Doing this NFL lineup rewind show that I do on Mondays, De'Ami Brown was 0.3% owned. Our boy Rinpack, Ryan Putnaik, here at Stokastic.com, had 24% of him in the millie.
Are you serious?
I'm dead serious.
How does that?
You can't make that shit up. It's the dumbest thing I've ever seen in my entire life. He's from the future.
Only the people that work here can do it, and only the people who have the tools at Stokastic, man. Those two powers combined, they do crazy things.
They are Captain Planet.
That's what they are. Ugh.
Jordan Klein didn't get that joke because he's a child. Did you get that joke? Did you ever watch Captain Planet?
Earth.
He's our hero.
Water.
Gonna take pollution down to zero.
Power.
Yeah, whatever.
Heart.
We have 2,000 people.
Isn't that what it is? Earth, water, power, heart.
You just got it. You crushed it.
Yeah, thank you.
I honestly didn't even remember that until you said it. But also, like this football game, we'll probably try to forget it as soon as it happens. Let's get into it, shall we? The quarterback position. We have Carson Wentz and Justin Fields. I don't know what you could want from a quarterback more than Carson Wentz on these Thursday games. What, 6-0? 6-0 on Thursday nights? Maybe he is Mr. Irrelevant in terms of like what he's achieved since getting hurt. Don't try to sneak it on fourth down or whatever that was when he tore his ACL against the Rams many moons ago in a Philadelphia jersey. He's a journeyman. He's now made himself to Washington, and I don't really know what to say. It's a 2-game slate that there's not going to be a lot of scoring. but Carson Wentz definitely has to be in that player pool. Are you going to be over or under his current projection in the captain spot of 11%?
I'm going to be over it. I think he meant 2-team slate, not 2-game. He knows it's a 1-gamer. Yes.
Two-team slate, obviously, yes.
If there's one thing I see that's incongruous with the team totals, with the game totals, I know these teams aren't good. I do know that the Washington defense is horrifically bad in the passing game. 29th in Football Outsiders DVOA, 29th in yards allowed per pass attempt. And that forces their offense into a very, very pass-heavy game script. As bad as Carson Wentz has been this year, he still is number 2 in total pass attempts, number 1 in passes of 20-plus air yards. And even if his bum shoulder is affecting him, this team is 3rd in team pass plays per game. So just pacing things out, they actually usually have to pass it because their defense is so bad. But maybe they just are a pass-heavy team. So going over 38 points, we should play that game again. What are the percentage chances that this game goes over, a touchdown over? It's 38 point total, just off the top of your head.
36%.
Well, you said 12 last time. I have it at 30 today. I agree. It's like closer to a third of the time.
Well, last game was a completely different situation than we're looking at here.
I just think it's good to set a baseline, right?
Right.
Because we want to find shootout potential. And with Washington's defense being horrible and Washington's offense passing a lot, that is one avenue to this game going differently than is projected.
Caleb McClain, that's not funny, but that's funny. It's not funny. You should think about that. Anyway. It's wild. I read it and I didn't know what to do.
Sometimes you just got it's a mic drop.
Caleb, get help. Get help. That's all I got for you. The thing about Carson Wentz is that if I'm going to play him in the captain spot, I got to play 2 pass catchers with him, and it does not feel very good. I mean, if you box score watch and go to Diami Brown, yeah, you could do that. But otherwise, how do you get away from playing Terry McLaurin? Like, if he's going to truly hit that ceiling game, where he's going to be the highest scorer in this game, which is kind of what you're trying to accomplish on this slate more than any other. Like, I need to play Terry McLaurin and Curtis Samuel with him, and I just don't feel like doing that. And so I'm having a tough time talking myself into Carson Wentz. Like, I'm going to have a ton of him in the utility. You're going to have a lot of quarterbacks in just about any game of this kind of sort. Right now, his utility ownership's around 49.5%, and the utility optimal north of 54%. That is called positive leverage, fam. And there's even more positive leverage going to Justin Fields, 7.5%, the most positively leveraged player in the entire game. Now, he gets a bad rap because he's not good at football, and that is understandably so. But you bring the rushing upside he has, you bring the utility optimal into that. He is by far the most important person in my lineups today. If he's hurt, then that's just the end of my slate. I have north of 85% of him. It feels awful, but if people are going to be lower on him just because, I want a ton of Justin Fields. How do you feel about him?
Yep. You play a quarterback when other people are scared to play quarterbacks on 1-game slates. And obviously things could go wrong. Things could go very wrong. Talk about the difference in team pass plays per game. Number 3 for Washington, number 32 for Chicago. If there's any team that's going to be dragging down the pace of this game and the number of plays in this game, it's certainly the Bears. And when you pass the 32nd highest, I guess, in the league, 18 times per game, we barely even know if Justin Fields is good. Now, we have a lot of advanced metrics that tell us he's probably bad, right? 25th in QBR, 32nd in deep ball accuracy rating, league average in red zone accuracy rating, and true passer rating. He's 32 of 35 qualified quarterbacks this season. It's not pretty right now, but I completely understand why you're getting there, right? Because you can get there alone. He's easier to stack. If again, rushing upside for quarterbacks can lift all boats, right? It can lift a low efficiency game, and he is currently 5th in red zone carries per game, 3rd in carries per game among quarterbacks. That really helps. But I think Wentz in a vacuum is a better play. I get why our tools are kind of navigating people there today, and why you're taking a stand. I think people are too scared to play Fields.
Yeah, they are. And I'm just going to have a ton of him. I have way more of him than I have of Wentz. He's my highest owned MVP. I think it's just rare when you run into a spot. This is kind of like Lamar Jackson-esque from a year or two ago, where he was just optimal captain all the time because of some of that rushing upside. And you didn't have to really worry yourself about who you're running him back with. It's kind of a it's kind of a freeing proposition on a slate like this where I can just play a ton of him. I generally have one pass catcher, or at least David Montgomery along for the ride in those lineups. But like, what a great feeling to know that you're going to get a lower owned Justin Fields than you probably should, and that the paths for him to work out optimal are boundless. Like it really frees it up to be able to just run the old optimizer and not have to go completely crazy with like, oh, I'm playing a quarterback and the captain, I need 2 pass catchers.
Was it Neil said that when he first ran the optimizer today, it was giving him 90+% Fields. I kind of love when the Stokastic projections, they just kind of guide you to the best plays. And so it forces you to make a decision, right? It's getting us way over the field naturally. Now we want to have more variance than that if we're going for a large field tournament. But at the same time, I completely understand why we're doing it. Can one pass catcher step up? Can Darnell Mooney actually have a game here?
No.
That might legitimately be the answer, man. Like, and the other thing, this could be the worst part. What if the reason they're 32nd in pass plays per game is because they will do anything not to show how bad of a passer Justin Fields is? I don't want that to be the case.
Yeah, don't we have him projected for nearly an interception, and he only has like 17 pass attempts projected for this game?
It's not good. I saw a hilarious graphic that said through 17 games, he has basically the same yards per attempt, yards per game, touchdown to interception ratio as Josh Allen's first 17 games. Get out of here. First of all, that's one of the craziest turnarounds from a mediocre start to a superstar ascendance, but you could see it happening from the front office to the coaching staff to the team around him. Veterans were saying it all around. This is so different. It's not even comparable.
Carson Wentz, would you play him in the captain spot with just one pass catcher?
100%.
You would? Okay.
I would.
That one feels tougher for me because I feel like I just want the pass catcher instead, like in the captain.
I feel like we have multiple options. I feel like we have 3 legitimate options in Washington today. We have Samuel, we have McLaurin, obviously, and I think we have Bates, who's going to have a significant snap share.
Okay. And then with Justin Fields, I just think you can do whatever you want.
I agree.
When you play him a captain. Yeah.
Play it naked, play 2.
Especially play him naked.
What are we doing here?
I don't know. Jordan Klein liked it. I liked it too. Oh God, no, Eric. Justin Fields, he's an attractive man, I think. I don't know. I don't know how you gauge those things, but I think he's like pretty attractive for a dude.
I have no idea where we're going.
To the running back position is where we're going next, of course. And there's this guy, Brian Robinson, who has probably the best story in the NFL this season. I'm sure you guys have heard it by now. Dude got shot 6 weeks ago, and he's playing football this week. Unbelievable story. He out-touched Antonio Gibson 9-3 last week in terms of running back numbers. Poor Matt. Yeah, no, I feel bad for Matt too. Yo, Eric. Yeah, Justin Fields. I don't know how you gauge those things. Happily married man, but Justin Fields might be attractive. Brian Robinson is attractive to my lineups tonight at 25.5%. Have a ton more of him than Antonio Gibson. JD McKissick for DraftKings purposes makes a lot of sense too, but how are you looking at this Washington Commanders backfield?
So I think Greg outlined it perfectly last hour. If you didn't hear that, you missed out, guys. But it looks like DraftKings and FanDuel feel really differently about how this Washington backfield is going to play out. And I think personally, FanDuel got it right. I think Brian Robinson is way, way too low in salary. And based on salary-based expectations, he looks like looks like the best running back on Washington for sure. Now, I do have a running back on Chicago that I like even better. We'll get to him in a minute. But Robinson's such an incredible story. I made a call on the Fantasy Football channel this week that Brian Robinson is the second half of the season's Dameon Pierce. I just think that the way that this team has talked about this player, and now the story getting even more incredible, and the fact that essentially the moment Brian Robinson came back, Rivera was like, oh yeah, Gibson's going back to return kicks. I don't know what you all thought. In a large field tournament, take your chances on Gibson, but Robinson's the dude in Washington. We'll find out tonight.
He's the absolute dude there. I have 0% Antonio Gibson tonight.
So you're just going full fade. It sounded like Neil was possibly leaning that way and saying that wasn't irrational at all. I certainly trust him. That almost makes me want to be the fish that plays him just because he's too expensive. I understand
Public's
it.
still going to click his name. Public's still going to have some.
So yeah, why go with the rest of them?
Yeah, us in our little bubble, like we always forget that there's a lot of people who are sitting on a toilet somewhere in New Hampshire that are going to put 20 lineups into the $3 tonight. I know I've had a lot of imagery in the last 3 minutes of my analysis and such, but
you're in a lot of directions today.
I'm just saying,
sometimes it's better to just stay silent and let you work.
Afternoon coffee, maybe a bad idea for me, but irregardless, I don't know what it would be, but Antonio Gibson is not in my player pool today. I'm just going to full fade him. If he burns me at 8,600 on DraftKings.com, so be it. I don't see it though.
I think there are so few paths for him dominating this game. You got to get multiple things right. This team suddenly becomes rush heavy or gets up real early, suddenly moves to a different running back, which means you predicted an injury, which no one can do other than the fact that he plays running back position. It's just too hard to get to. If you're trying to win a milli maker and be unique, which Neil Orfield always talks about, I think that is one path, but you're probably right. Just stay away.
I have my moments when I'm right. I have other moments when I'm not. One of those might be with David Montgomery, who I have an absolute ton of tonight.
We should talk about JD McKissic too, right?
Yeah, we should. PPR especially, 6,400. I'm at the field with him. I've made zero stand. I get it. Like, my worry is that as Brian Robinson becomes more acclimated, and this is as close of a game as you're going to see Washington projected for just about all year long. Like in terms of spread, I mean, it's a 1-point spread in either direction, depending on which book you're looking at. I don't find it all that difficult to think that JD McKissic could get phased out a little bit more if they get up early. And then Brian Robinson just gets more carries than we think, or, God forbid Antonio Gibson ends up getting there. But I just have enough concern about JD McKissic, but at the same time, we're seeing that passing game volume, 7, 9, 4, 7 targets. Those are his last 4. It's just that you didn't have Brian Robinson in the equation at all.
Right. If you look at the first few week stats, you're like, wow, this looks good. 3rd in the NFL in targets, 5th in receiving yards, 4th in receptions, especially if you're playing on a platform like DK, that looks really enticing. He's pretty negative leverage in our tools. And I think I'm kind of with you. I'm right around the field. I do have some shots of him at captain because that Austin Eckler type performance is like a 1 percentile outcome, but it's there for him in a way that I don't really feel like it is for Antonio Gibson. We're not saying this is a likely thing, but if they're in comeback mode for an entire second half or something like that, and they just have to turn to McKissic in the passing game, it's not unreasonable. There are ways for him to get there. I'm not necessarily suggesting you all go out and do it.
I want to talk a little no-house advantage as we go to the running back side from go to the Bears side of this, because I do think one of the things you can do on no-house advantage that's a lot of fun is when you have Khalil Herbert and David Montgomery listed there, you can correlate what you're doing and what that lineup should look like. So if I go to no-house advantage, which you all need to be signed up at because overlay, confirmed a thing, over 700, well, exactly 695 lineups left that are going to, it's not going to fill. The $15, the Thursday Night Football Showdown hasn't filled all year. It's not going to fill tonight. So you need to go sign up and go play. And one of the things you can do, and I do this on other sites as well, but I try to correlate some of these props together. 60.5 rushing yards for David Montgomery. I love the over of that. And 44.5 rushing yards for Khalil Herbert. I don't know. It just feels like close games like they had against Minnesota. He's going to get phased out of this offense for David Montgomery. I like the over of 60.5 rushing yards. I like the under of 44.5 for Khalil Herbert. Those would be up there in my confidence spots. What do you think about the Bears backfield in tonight's game, Matt Savoca?
Well, I'm all for those no-house advantage bets. I mean, first of all, this is an edge we've been finding kind of across the board, is our ability to take the secondary and tertiary running backs and kind of suss out their opportunity share and find little edges like the top edge we have on no house advantage. The line for JD McKissic's rushing yards is 15.5. Now, obviously, if he breaks one huge run, you're done. But the median projection, when we run the simulations, it's a third of that, guys. We win this in 93% of our sims. You got to go under on JD McKissic there. Now, if you're looking at the Bears backfield, I think you play this exactly right. David Montgomery should be utilized really effectively. What if you do what if you play the game that you are thinking of with Justin Fields, and then you add David Montgomery and you capture all of the Bears theoretical scoring tonight? Is that a way you're playing things?
Yeah, I like that quite a bit. Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. Again, I'm just trying to build out the game script of what makes sense. And one of the beautiful things about No House Advantage is you know what that number is going to be the entire time. Like there's no changing of it like you would have at a traditional sports book. We know that these numbers are going to stay exactly the same. So when you look at them, they're kind of built in at the beginning of the week for that game script. And it feels like this might have come out on Monday without taking into account Khalil Herbert just being phased out of that game against Minnesota with a healthy David Montgomery. And so I'm definitely going to be taking less than that 44.5 number. Now, Khalil Herbert in DFS, that's where it gets a little iffy for me because, he's not cheap. He's definitely somebody you're still going to have to pay a little bit of money to get to. How do you feel about him on a site like DraftKings where there's really no receiving volume and he's 6,200 garnering a little bit of attention?
I'm not in on Herbert today. I get how it happens, right? And I honestly think he's a talented player. I don't think this situation is that different than Dallas, where you got Ezekiel Elliott clogging up carries for the more efficient Tony Pollard. David Montgomery is the one clogging up carries for Khalil Herbert. Now, I'm not sure the Bears see it that way. And I will say, granted, David Montgomery has had his moments of efficiency, but look, last week for Khalil Herbert, 27% snap share, 4 carries, 4 routes run. This is Montgomery's backfield when he is in the game, when he is available for the game.
Yeah. And I love playing over at No House Advantage because I like making money. And this is the best spot for your dollar to go play right now. This Thursday Night Football Showdown. We have projections here at Stokastic for you guys to take advantage of too. So be checking those out on the daily because they're free. Like why would you not take advantage of things that are free 99? That's it. Free 99 is the best 99. That's what I was told.
I mean, that's factually correct. Unless you like paying a lot, which is something. No, I don't either.
Stupid. Any other running back that we even want to talk about? Blasingame.
That's a person on the field. That's all I have to say. Like this is such a bad game for 200, 400 salary players. If you're
no. We're going to the tight end position, baby. I got
okay. Maybe once we get there, but in the running back position, it's Montgomery and Herbert, and you got 3 options in Washington theoretically, and really it's Robinson and McKissick. Gibson, as you said, a long shot compared to those other 4.
Hey, T-Bird 3716, your mom. Anything else that you want to talk about at running back at all?
This Chicago team will utilize this running game way more than it should. So get David Montgomery in there in the flex. He's certainly a cash game play. Not pretty, but he'll probably end up in the optimal the way this offense is operating.
How much David Montgomery did you end up with in that captain spot?
Let me look.
I'm just curious because this feels like the guy that is going to end up higher in the captain than what we think. Looking at his captain optimal here at Stokastic and the top showdown plays, he's got a 15.1% captain optimal rate, and he's showing up a 17.3% captain ownership. Something tells me he could even end up higher than that, and I'm going to be very
I have him in
out.
like a fifth of my lineups there.
There you go, 20%. That's what I'm worried about is like, I don't even know if I think about him as a captain spot I want to get to more than the field, but like the same way I think defense ends up really steamed up, I could see David Montgomery, because of the way salary works out, being very popular in the captain spot.
When it works out for the Bears, this guy, it's like one of those backwards things. Like if you rush for 100 yards, you win the game. But honestly, if they somehow find themselves ahead and in a positive game script, God, are they going to just love to run the ball with Montgomery in the second half?
They sure are. Guys, hit that like button, subscribe button, and notification bell. We've got Matt Savoca working really, really hard, and then me just saying weird stuff from time to time. That's kind of our MO at this point in time. But right now, we have this ownership generator that we have going. We have DFS projections. We have everything at Stokastic that you could possibly want. Sign up now. Is it NFL Live, Jordan Klein? Because I'm looking at the TMP. It's Showdown Live. There it is. 50% off your first week for all of the great tools and content at Stokastic.com using that promo code. I would take advantage of that here now. We've got so much coming down the pipeline for NBA starting up on Tuesday. Yes, Regular season
here.
NBA has arrived. My baby, my glorious, glorious child of God. I love you so much. Can't wait for some NBA action. And if you can't either, well, I guess you could wait till Tuesday, but why would you miss out on football this entire weekend if you're watching the show? I don't know. I definitely want you guys signing up and joining us here. Best data, best tools in the industry, bar none. Stop guessing, star winning. Join us at Stokastic plus 2-day Showdown Live. All caps, one word. Just spell it out on the screen. To the wide receiver position we go. Good Lord Almighty of Christ and Jesus our Lord. Terry McLaurin. I think Carson Wentz realized that he's on his football team last week, so that was a plus. But, oh boy, it's been brutal. This is not the season you've wanted from one of the more talented wide receivers who had made guys like Taylor Heineke a thing. Like, legitimately, Terry McLaurin was getting there constantly with guys like Taylor Heineke, and I can't think of a more damning thing than Curtis Samuel outproducing Terry McLaurin early on. But you said you liked him, and I want to start with him. The road team, the Washington Commanders. How do you feel about him versus Curtis Samuel in your lineups today?
Look, Terry McLaurin still has the highest air yards and the highest weighted opportunity, which combines air yard share and target share on the team. Curtis Samuel is nipping at his heels, absolutely. But I think Terry McLaurin, in terms of talent and opportunity, seems like an efficient quarterback game away from a breakout. Does it happen here? I'm not a wizard. I don't know. I can't predict these things, but there is enough here under the surface to say that this breakout game is coming. I think he's a great DFS play in that regard. I don't think Curtis Samuel's a bad pick, to be honest, either. And in our tools, especially outside of the captain spot, Curtis Samuel has a massively high leverage score. But if you're asking me who my breakout play is, my player I want to bet on tonight, it's Terry McLaurin.
All righty. Well, that is a confident man. You sound like a confident man about such things. I will say Teddy Wayman, good people, always hanging out in the chat. Jordan Klein, did you see a super chat come in? I never saw a super chat come in at any point. Was it on the previous show?
He did have one. No, okay. He did.
If you put the question into the chat again, I will answer it right now. Can't tell you how much I appreciate it, but I never saw anything. So that is my bad if I didn't see anything there. But because he's such a good friend of the program, and I always see him in the chat hanging out on different shows, wanted to make sure I address that immediately. So Jordan Klein, I don't know where you are in the world, but I need you to find that super chat for me. Scary Terry over Samuel. So is that's the flag plant for today?
I think so.
Okay.
It's not that different in salary. I'm going to say yes, not I think so.
Okay. I'm kind of opposite. Just my lineups are telling a little bit different story. I'm north of 45% Curtis Samuel. He's my highest owned wide receiver in this entire game. Short ADOT guy can kind of get there in a multitude of ways. I feel pretty confident that if somebody's going to have a massive upside at the captain spot, I mean, we've seen Terry McLaurin. He's so good. Back in his Ohio State days, I guess he was kind of a backup still there because of how good that wide receiver core was still a first round pick, I believe. And then is just ran in the NFL, hit the ground running there. But it's just such a gross thing because Carson Wentz has done this. He kind of keys in on his guy. It seems like Curtis Samuel's been his guy early on. I'm still going to have some Terry McLaurin, but I'm a little bit under the field there. Hey, sure. We found it. Teddy Wayman. Look at that. Thank you, Jordan Klein. What's up, guys? Just wanted to pop in and say cheers. Let's all get drunk for this game. Okay.
Oh, I can't wait to.
And then he came back with another 5 spot. Is leaving $3K on the table too much on FanDuel large field GPPs? In a word, no, it is not, especially in a game like this.
No way. I think Neil was saying he was talking about lineups that left $18K in salary on last Thursday's Sludge Fest. That's a lot, but 3 is you can push it. You can push it.
I mean, think about the Broncos, some of the optimal lineups that have been in that absolute disgusting existence. I mean, it's been like 2 kickers, 2 defenses, and then a dude.
And then just like anyone who fits.
Oh man, so many super chats.
Oh, here they come.
Look at this. You guys are the best. Eric Traub, 999. That's a nice number. Favorite player under 10% in DK utility to take a shot on. Speaking of shots. We just say that when we hear salary-based expectations.
It's got to be De'Ami Brown, right? His ownership projection actually went down a little bit. We were mentioning like an 11% number. We're now thinking that it might be a little bit lower with the expected popularity of Samuel and McLaurin. De'Ami Brown, who obviously just caught 2 passes for a huge 105 yards and 2 scores. Not going to have that every single week, but showed the big play potential. That's definitely the one for me. Absolutely. At 10.1%, I hope that's not cheating too badly.
I want to do a naked dance, and my naked dance will be if Cole Turner gets in the end zone today. I have so much of this fool. He's the $200 tight end that I was talking about. I'll just kind of jump to it. We have 20 minutes left in our show, so why not? Cole Turner, I have a ton of at $200. He is the guy that I'm leaving a ton of salary. I have lineups with 6, 7, 8K on DraftKings.com, and Cole Turner is that guy for me. There are some numbers that kind of back up what we're seeing too from him last time out. He ran a route on 49% of the dropbacks. So that's a plus in week 5. He came in, you're seeing this time share basically with Logan Thomas out. Not only does it open up John Bates, but he's far more popular. I think Cole Turner gets enough run to be viable, and you're really just trying to find the end zone with one of these guys. He's got over a 3 projection here at Stokastic, but for me, you're running 50% of the routes in some of these spots where we're just needing that one touchdown catch from somebody random, and you're only going to probably find one in a game with this low of a total. So he is a guy I'm just making a very aggressive stand for today.
I love that. And obviously we have to contextualize this, right? What is the probability that happens?
Low.
It's low. It's extremely low. But when you're right, your lineups shoot to the top in a way that not many other players on this slate can give you that opportunity, especially alone. I certainly think that John Bates is the more likely person to succeed because of Logan Thomas's absence. And honestly, if you look at all leverage scores from all utility plays on DraftKings of the wide receivers and tight ends on either team, Bates is actually number 2 behind Curtis Samuel. I do think there's some meat on the bone here. He's got 14 targets this year. 9 of those have come in the last 2 games. Played 2/3 of snaps last week, ran 21 routes. I mean, that's enough for me. But you're a good DFS player. You know that you're differentiating yourself by a player who's going to see increased work and has absolutely no salary.
What do you mean he's not going to get playing time? He literally got playing time last week.
No, I was commending you.
I'm seeing this Datnica person, Cole Turner. I was not talking to you. You're a lovely person inside and out. We've got 51% of the offensive snaps he played last week. 51%. That's not nothing.
No, absolutely not. I mean, what other access to a 51% snap share do we have at 200? Immer Smith-Marset is not getting that. He's 600. Is Dax Milne going to play that much? Monty Rogers? No, absolutely not. It's a unique asset on this crazy slate.
Unique New York. That's all.
He will outpace his salary-based expectations.
Oh my God. Good thing this doesn't have alcohol in it. I'd be dead. Anything else that you want to talk about for these cheapies? But anyway, there we go. We spent some nice time there. Let's go back to the wide receiver spots with the Commanders. We had McLaurin, we had Curtis Samuel. They make a lot of sense, but so does De'Ami Brown coming off of, I don't know, an evisceration of that last slate. If you're a sick person like Rinpack and could actually get there. He had 2 massive plays. We talked about him being a massive piece. I do get worried he might get steamed up because people click on a box score and we forget people live outside of our bubble, and it's tougher to project what it would be. But I'd feel pretty confident if I saw 27 fantasy points like he had last week. I feel less confident knowing that 4 targets could very easily turn into 2 targets and then you're dead.
The Human Torch was denied a bank loan. I think that De'Ami Brown is used enough to be viable in a DFS slate, right? That's really what it comes down to. We can't predict what 4 targets will do. And you're right, because of that variability, we literally saw 0 targets in the first 3 games and less than a 15% snap share. So with Jahan Dotson on the field, which he's not tonight, don't play him. No. This guy was an afterthought. Good for him for making the most of his 15 routes in each game right now. But I don't think he's suddenly earned 30 routes. I'm not going to go run out there and say that he's an incredible play. But big play potential from players who are sub 10% owned are what we chase in DFS. And that's why he's got some appeal and is in a bunch of my lineups.
Let's see. Cam Sims, I have a little bit of. It doesn't feel great. You can't do it.
He sucks.
He sucks. He's terrible. But also 4 points could end up being enough. Maybe.
At
Probably
1,400, yeah. On a slate like this, maybe.
I hate him too. He's so terrible. Watching
10.6% snap share this year. Okay. I mean, again, we have limited options on a 1-game slate. They pass way more than the other team. Mm-hmm. If he falls into the end zone, I'm not going to say I'm super surprised, but I'm not going to go there tonight.
Well, let's go to the Chicago side of it, where, as you said, ball is not getting thrown around the air very often. And when it does, it can get dumped off to David Montgomery, their best pass catching performance of last week. Him, 4 catches for 62 yards. That's just kind of what you're working with here with the Chicago team. You brought up Darnell Mooney. I'd rather play Mad Eye Mooney. Shout out Harry Potter. Equanimous St. Brown, whatever. Velus Jones. Velus Jones. I really don't like the Chicago side, but you got to play somebody, and it can't just be Mooney because everybody else is going to play him too. What are we doing with Chicago?
Well, if you're playing anyone, you're playing Mooney, or you're just throwing a dart into the wind. Like, you have no idea what's going to happen beyond that. But even Mooney has been so underwhelming this year. I'm just looking at the air yards right now. Darnell Mooney has 350 air yards for the Chicago Bears. The next closest person is Equanimous St. Brown at 151.
Jesus.
He's got 200 air yards more than the next player on this team. And they are mostly spare yards right now because they're not turning into a whole lot of points. In fact, Equanimous St. Brown has only 4 PPR fantasy points less in total this year than Darnell Mooney. That just speaks to the level of inefficiency that this offense has dealt with all year long. Could it turn around in a 1-game slate? Absolutely. But if you're looking at just our median projection of about 10 fantasy points on DraftKings, compare that to salary-based expectations.
There it is.
It's playable, but not exciting. Almost like this entire Bears team.
Dante Pettis. I'd rather eat lettuce. You hear Smith Marset. He used to play for the Vikings. That's all I know. This is just the absolute stone cold worst team for targeting some of these guys ever.
Emmer Smith Marset is an interesting player in the sense that he's a speedster. And if he breaks 1 at 600, he's gonna probably be in the optimal, for sure be in the optimal if he breaks like a touchdown. But we've already seen him lose his job in Minnesota. And then they're playing Minnesota last week. They're driving down the field. They actually have a good drive put together. And then Emmer Smith Marset fumbles as he's going out of bounds.
Loser.
His old team. The kind of play that a coach watches the film 2 or 3 times of and goes, yeah, I'm not playing that guy next week. Maybe that's overthinking it, but it's enough for me to be like, I don't even trust that 2-point projection we have as a median right now.
Yeah, it feels gross. I mean, Darnell Mooney, I'm below the field on. Equanimous St. Brown, I'm below the field on. I'm below the field on every single pass catcher not named Cole Kmet from the Bears.
So I think fine going to the low ADOT targets in general. The running backs and the tight ends is just the way to do it. And if you're concerned about the wind at all, that's definitely the way to play it.
Yeah, I just want the guys running the football and the guys that aren't getting the ball thrown to them by Justin effing Fields.
That sucks. I was really high on this guy coming in. It's a little too early.
I just updated things. I have 100% Justin Fields now. This is surely going to go well. I love losing money on a Thursday night with the worst football game ever. How about you?
Let's just dump in that money. Just dump it into the fire.
God. And 29% Cole Turner. I have problems. Anything else from the wide receiver
How many people
position?
How many lineups have at least one person named Cole? Can you do that calc for us, please? With Kmet.
No.
Sorry. I'm giving you. Because you have a lot of
tight ends.
Tight ends, yeah.
Yeah. Well, you're as cold as ice.
That was a little bit better.
I tried. Let's continue our way on to tight end because I know we got to get to kicker defense. Actually, you know what? Let's just do tight end super, super quick here.
Yeah.
I really have no other things I need to do because No House Advantage, we talked about them. They're our friends. Let me check in on them. Still overlay. Confirmed still overlay. Use promo code Stokastic. Get up to a $50 first match deposit bonus over at nohouseadvantage.com. Download the app at the Google Play Store or in the Apple Store if you're a normal person and have an Apple phone and not a serial killer like Jeffrey Dahmer with your Androids. What?
No, just keep doing you.
Hold up your phone, Matt Savoca.
is iPhone.
Oh, see, there we go. I'm fine. I'm just saying. I'm just throwing it out there. But yeah, No House Advantage. Go download it at the Apple Store like a normal person, and then nohouseadvantage.com. It's great stuff. Love you all. And hey, if you've got a Google device, such as life, but do better. Let's go to the tight end position here, my friends. We have Cole Kmet. He's my boy. I've got over 25% of him today. He's right around 19% of the utility. I have some Cole Kmet in the captain. If for whatever reason, I don't know what the odds are to get 2 touchdown catches from him in like goal line scenarios. I'm going to guess, I don't know, a bazillion to 1, something of that nature. I would maybe think about a single game parlay. Cole Kmet to catch 2 touchdowns. That's got to pay a zillion to 1 or something.
Well, I don't even think you need to get that crazy. I saw a screenshot from a friend who said that, what was it? Wentz over 275 yards, Fields over 250 yards, plus 2960, which if you can't do that math, I looked up already. It's about 3.3% implied probability that they don't even reach 300, just one at 275 and one at 250.
Yeah.
It's just like Bills Chiefs last year and this Sunday.
Yeah. Well, Cole Kmet, nothing like going all in on a guy who his most targets in a game is 4. And it's not like he's free either, but like 4 is a lot of targets when you're wearing a Chicago Bears uniform this season. So there's at least that. I think just as you said, short 8-aught guys closer to the line of scrimmage, him, David Montgomery, I think it just makes a lot of sense that they might be the main beneficiaries of passing game volume in this win. But Cole Kmet, have to get to a lot of him. Ryan Griffin is showing up in a couple lineups, but that is just like deepest of field tournaments. I feel better about him at $1,000 than any of the wide receivers from the Bears side. So anything stand out to you between those 2 tight ends?
Yeah, I got some Cole Kmet as well. The annoying thing is, if you look at the overall defensive metrics against the pass, Washington, terrible. We mentioned that. But in scheduled adjusted fantasy points allowed, which just contextualizes fantasy points allowed for the teams that the offenses have already played, they're 8th best in the league against tight ends. Small sample size still. We're still, just 5-6 weeks into the year, but I think we're just going to Kmet because of the way that Justin Fields plays, not because the matchup looks particularly good. I'm fine being with the field, but I'm not really going over on either player, to be honest. Bates is actually the player I'm taking the biggest stand on of the 4.
I don't know why super chats are not showing up in my column on the right. I saw the one that was $9.99. Big Mikey NY21. Did you get my super chat? I did not. I must have to update my app or something. Apple products. Hey, see, there you go. Maybe it is Google. Yeah, freaking iPads and stuff, whatever. Cole Kmet, 0 catches. Definitely in the range of outcomes. Wouldn't be shocked. This is the thing. We're tangled. We're playing a dangerous game. There it is. Is Pettis lineup poison? Sure is. But I'm still going to play like a little bit of him.
It comes down to what are you playing it in, right? Because if you're playing in the Millie Maker, if he could be a 1-catch, 1-touchdown guy, we've seen it this year, and that'll work. That'll work when no one's playing him. But can we predict that? No,
we cannot. But we can predict that Blasingame is going to be the Millie Maker winner, because that's just the kind of year that it's been in Showdown. It's been horrible. Let's go to the tight ends from the Washington Commanders side of things here. No Logan Thomas. That opens up opportunity for my boy Cole Turner. We already talked about him. The more likely candidate, and according to our projections as well, is going to be John Bates. He's just a master, that Bates. So look at him, play him, click on him if you would like. How do you feel about him on today's slate? We haven't talked about him yet.
I mean, Bates is a player that I'm going to be taking a stand on. Without Logan Thomas in there, I think you're going to see at least a 60% snap share today from John Bates. I think you're going to see at least 3 targets, and I think you're going to see him go well under owned. This is a player that also had a chance to be an every down player last year for Washington, and he actually played pretty well. I understand from a DFS perspective why you're going to say, I'm going to pivot and go Cole Turner, because when that happens, a lot of things go right for me. But John Bates, man, I kind of see a 6-target game for him today, when they just kind of have to move the ball methodically downfield and try to just, 6 points are going to feel like 12 points in a game like today. So tight end dump offs are going to be more important than ever.
Your lips to God's ears. That would be great. Both tight ends, guys that I'm getting to I do think Cole Turner just is going to end up drastically lesser owned here. 7.5% for him. Still going to be my favorite guy, under 10% as it stands in our projections. But now, with 5 minutes left, we've gotten to the kicker defense spot, and they are massively important. It's the same way I feel about quarterback. You're going to get to them. But kicker, I mean, if it's going to be that windy and we're not expecting a lot of offense, I mean, there's a lot of ways that they end up optimal on this kind of a slate. Cairo Santos, Joey Sly, both ending up in my lineups. We'll finish out with defense. But how do you feel about kickers in this spot?
I actually think this is a great time to play kickers because of the wind. Anytime the game environment says, wow, kickers might really be viable, which this game total and game environment absolutely points us to, and then there's some reason that people are scared to do it, I'll go there. I won't be afraid to go there, especially with some reports that this wind is going down and it's not really gusting. You guys, two kickers could easily be optimal in a game like this with two quarterbacks like this. They have two of the higher leverage scores on the slate, especially at the captain position. There's just not a lot to dislike other than the number of miles per hour on the windometer. I don't know how we measure wind.
I like the windometer.
It's not bad.
Wow. Matt Savoca is a smartish individual. He knows the things and the words. The windometer.
Not that one.
Oh my God. Well, speaking of positive leverage,
Salary
we have to talk about
expectations.
Jordan Klein from the top rope with the body slam, straight through the table, Buffalo Bills style. But let's round it out. Defenses are very, very optimal according to our tools here. Bears defense, 26% optimal appearance rate, 32.7% for the Commanders. Both of them under-owned compared to that. Now, if we get to lock and they're both 35%, I would not be shocked. But as it stands right now, looks like defenses are good plays. I'm under the field on both of them because it just seems like they end up way more popular in these type of game environments. Chicago theoretically is going to try to run it a lot, even though Justin Fields' interception props are way up in the air. How are you feeling about defense as we round out our show?
Obviously, both in the clear, you can play them situation. Our tools make them look very good, especially at the utility spot. But ultimately, I think you and Greg in the last hour were talking about how I think the field is wising up to this situation a little bit. In these ugly game scripts, they want to go to the defenses. I'm still going to have plenty of lineups where I'm playing one, but I'll be honest, I'm not playing two in this game, even in this ugly game environment. It's likely sludge fest. I do think the Commanders' defense is one that's interesting. Like, no one believes that they're a favorite. I get it, but there's a reason Vegas has them as a 1-point favorite. And, you know, weirder things have happened than the Bears losing by multiple touchdowns at home when they were just 1-point underdogs.
All righty. Yeah. 2 minutes. It took me. Give me a second. Give me a
second. Just checking.
I know, baby. Just easing the tension. That's what it is. But we've reached the end of our boarding walk. That was the No House Advantage live before a lock show. 2 minutes. People need to know. I know a couple of you are last minute tinkering, last minute adjusting those lineups. What's the one thing they need to know before they finish out their builds and this game kicks off in T-minus 90 seconds now?
The Washington defense is terrible, and it forces them to pass a whole lot. Choose your pass catchers wisely.
I will say Justin Fields and the captain by himself, 1-5, has a chance to maybe work out in this one, where I have Carson Wentz in the flex with 3 pass catchers and a kicker, Joey Sly, and then Justin Fields finds a way to just run amok, makes a big play. I do think this is one of the more ridiculous situations where we could run into a spot where it's neither defense on a game that everybody expects defense, and you have a Justin Fields in the captain spot winning $1 million with no other piece from that game. How do you feel about that one for a hot take as we get out of here?
It's a great hot take. You better win $1 million if it happens.
Yeah, I better, because I'm the only person I think who has those kind of lineups, a couple of them. And then Cole Turner, why don't you go catch a football, young man? Thank you so much. And thank you so much to Jordan Klein, who is by far the best, live chat expert, if you will. He definitely is better at that than anything else in his job, for sure. From the top
Play
row.
us out, Jordan, please.
Yeah, we're leaving. Whatever. Goodbye. Have fun, everybody. Enjoy the game. Good luck. See you back here on Sunday. Let's get it.